Hei. Det var høyt. Ja, da er det bedre nå. Det er splittet på der det står på det på bachelorrommet. Så jeg har satt en isplitt med kontrollromlyden. Ja. Hei. Ja. Så går han direkte inn på Magic-mixeren. Ja, det skal jo egentlig det. Skal vi se. Ja. Ron. Ta telefonen, han holder. Ja. Ja, det er ja. Ja, skjønner. Skal vi se. Master PA. Skal vi se. Ja, 10 dB. Ja. Så. Ja. Er det høyt nå? Ok. Hva med nå? Er det høyt? Er det bra nå? Ok. Ja, men det er ikke du. Hei, 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 hei. Snakker, 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 snakker. Snakker, 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 snakker. Snakker, 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 snakker. Skal vi prøve 1, 2. Hører du meg? Suppopo, hei, hei. Ja. Hører du meg, Ron? Ron? Ja, hører du meg lavt nå, kanskje? Det. Ja, med mygga. Skal vi se. Hello.
Hello.
You are one of the presenter?
Present and try.
Okay. I do not have any of the presentation for today.
Oh, so I have to bring my files?
I don't know, maybe?
I already did it to the...
Yeah, I know, but
But you didn't
I don't know who to talk to about.
Okay.
Our finance.
He wants to finance his point.
No, he hasn't received it. Like, he also didn't have
That's
mine.
okay.
他下午的。
Anyway, let's see.
Yeah. Skal vi se. Er det... Skal vi se. Yeah? No, not just only the trackpad.
He wears his laptop, so can he sign down here?
Yeah, if we have it on, you can use his laptop and we can, yeah, for sure. Ron? Er det høyt i salen, eller er det høyt nok i salen? Eller litt lavt? For nå er jeg på liksom pluss 10 dB på mikseren. Jeg får ikke skudd opp mer hvis det er noen som prater litt lavt. Så da må vi gå opp på masteren. Ja. Skal vi se. Hvordan? Ble det bedre? Ja. Tror det ble litt bedre. Ja.
session. You have to excuse us because Ali and I need to go and present at the UPAC seminar. We were both as part of the Urban Task Force on Lingo. Just a bit of a timing thing which was out of our control, but we will run there and run back as fast as we can. So thank you, and you're actually going to be helping us in the meantime. Yeah? Thank you very much.
No? Yes? Okay. Well, I mean, thank you very much, Nupur, for introducing. And I have to say, this is the dream situation, which means I'm in control of the time of my own speech. So I can go like, 2 times, 45 minutes, proper academic lecture and everything, Sorry, I had to wake you up. This is kind of graveyard session, which means after lunch, everybody is just dreaming about falling asleep, and do that. But actually, I'll try to introduce the topic, which I think is maybe not necessarily fully relevant to the Norwegian situation, but I guess also in this case, there is a couple of the issues which could be maybe discussed or improved, but actually which is relevant for a substantial part of Europe as well as a lot of the non-European countries, which are called the post-transformation or transformation countries, within which the new demand for the public public participation is actually growing. And what is actually interesting is that in the countries like that, actually there is a huge demand for the citizens' involvement into the planning process. And in many cases, and this was tried and tested a lot of times, and in these cases, this demand and this pressure for getting involved is much higher than in the well-developed democracies. I can tell you that I'm coming from Poland, Central and Eastern Europe, which is not so maybe far away from here, geography-wise. But the same things are in China, the same things are in Russia, the same things are in South Africa and Kenya and some other places. And I can remember from our Nairobi Congress in Kenya, when there was a debate about the citizens' involvement, when one of the Kenyan colleagues, proper female, stood up and said, sisters and brothers, when we start to speak, this is the end of any opposition to that what we have to say. It basically means that if they get involved, if they start to take the floor, nobody's gonna stop this thing from running. So what I would like to actually focus on is actually this public participation practice in post-transition countries. So I'm not going to read out all my PowerPoints, but I would like you to, if possible, to focus a little bit on them. But also, it might be possible that actually you go through the paper in case you are interested in more in depth about that, what is in there. You can always ask me for the copy if you want. But the main topic of the paper is, of course, the public participation and the issues associated with how to apply that in this kind of transition environment. First of all, what is public participation? I guess each and every one of us know it very well, but we have to understand that this is a key issue in the contemporary theory and practice of planning. So you can actually even say that there is no planning without participation, and there is no need for participation if we are not planning something. So these two things are very deeply interlinked. And this is very well developed practice within a lot of countries, although with the political, social and economical changes of the 1990s, this practice has also evolved and has become part of the practice for Central and Eastern Europe. And as I already said, there is a lot of the demand for that, and also you can make an argument then the countries like Poland or the countries like Central and Eastern European countries, the societies of those are much more demanding in terms of public participation than countries with well-established democratic systems. But what is important about that is, of course, this is a very positive sign, because in result we get a lot of the people who are getting actively involved in shaping urban environment. But at the same time, this whole issue of public participation is so much overwhelming that there is actually the need for new tools and approaches regarding organization of public participation that have to be developed. So basically the aims of the paper, which I'm going to present today, is to discuss this emerging everyday practice of public participation in the so-called post-transition countries. I would like to reflect also on my own experience in the process of actually leading the participation processes, but also the conclusions will be drawn from the real-life cases within which I was involved. So, as I already said, there is this whole issue of public participation is nothing new. This is not a novelty for our profession. It's basically based on involving local community in the decision-making process. And there is a lot of initiatives which also have been awarded by Isocarp. Today we were witnessing the awards of excellence. I remember that in Wuhan, in China, the award was given to the city of Amsterdam for the so-called Wiki City plan. Some of you might have heard about that. It was a kind of interesting and at that time a very novel approach to city planning. But since that, a lot of the new forms of public participation have been developing. Also, there is a lot of different roles of public participation in the planning process. And what is important to note that in some cases public participation is treated just as an addition to the regular planning process. And this is usually the case when planning is being made in the, so to speak, good old traditional way, meaning a bunch of technocrats are sitting somewhere and planning something according to the some kind of principles or political demands. But in many cases, if that is not working, then we might get up a kind of alternative form of public participation, which is a sort of substitute to the regular planning process. So instead of having a kind of coexistence of participation and citizens' involvement and professional discourse on the future of certain places, we might get either public participation as unwanted addition in many cases, or in other cases we might get public participation as a substitute of the regular planning process. And in some of the Central and Eastern European countries we are facing this process when planners are being treated like people who are thinking in the old way, and therefore the general public believes that they know better how cities should be shaped. I'm not going to take any of those positions, but I'd like you to realize that that these situations actually are happening, and that means that planners don't have easy life regarding public participation, and they have to reinvent themselves, they have to reinvent the profession, and they have also to include this public participation in the regular, so to speak, planning operations. On the other hand, the general public also has to understand that even if somebody has a good title to talk about certain issues, and not necessarily his or her truth is the only one, and not necessarily his or her truth should prevail. So this is an issue which is actually happening. And of course, this is associated with this kind of change in the paradigm regarding city planning. We are actually starting from this kind of traditional approach based in many cases on the command and control system. This is not existing anymore, but basically this was the point of departure. And now we are having the new approach, which is basically developed on the statement that there is no fixed truth anymore, there is no fixed paradigm, that everything depends on the conditions and all the issues. I mean, none of those is good, because as we know, regarding planning, there are a lot of different things which you have to take into account when you plan the city, and it's not necessarily the public opinion which is the only right thing to take into account. But as I said, many people who are representing local communities, they just don't realize that, and they are just looking only after their own businesses. So in that case, as I said, we are having the issue of involving local community in a kind of civilized way. And that's why the title of my paper is about civilizing public participation, which means bringing together the professionals and public and the general public in their opinions, and how to basically invite them back to the table and invite them to talk about all these things, and then reach the conclusions which are both good on one hand for the local community and in line with their ideas, but on the other hand that the developed solution actually meets the standards of the proper planning for the certain site, taking into account all the technical things and so on, so on. I guess you know better what I'm talking about than me right now, right? But also we have to realize that planning actually, in this case, goes far beyond the just policy making and includes also design for spaces, and this is very important thing. In many cases, many of the participation issues are emerging not at the level of the policy making, but at the level of the design for the particular space. Basically speaking, people are not able to understand thick planning policy documents, but they are saying yes or no to this or that form of street arrangement, basically speaking, which they like or not like, right? So this is the way when people are actually interacting. And also, there is a need of involving public participation not only in this final design part, but also with the structure, regulatory, and action planning, which seems to be the very important thing in the whole process. So we can actually say that the public participation in action is based on this ladder of participation, which was developed some time ago, but within the literature it's widely discussed. But basically we are starting from informing, then going through consulting, then going through participation, or this proper participation, which actually means that this is dealing with the problem, not with the solution. So people are confronted with a problem that has to be solved, and then on that basis this planning group can actually reach some kind of solution. And finally, or the last step in the whole thing is called co-investing, which basically means that people are not only invited to talk about certain issue, but they are invited to the process of actually implementing that using their own money. This especially works in case of urban regeneration, when people have to improve their own homes or their own houses or their own courtyards or whatever they have over there, using their own money. So basically, when we speak about civilizing this whole process, it means actually we have to start with the group of the local stakeholders, which in many cases is very much interested in this whole issue, and especially the local leaders. And we have to understand that there are local leaders who are always interested in getting involved in some kind of discourse, and there are certain, so to speak, interest parties which are involved only in case their particular business is being threatened by some planning or design solution. Like an example, if we invite people from the certain street, let's discuss the design policy of the street, maybe somebody gets interested. But if we start working on the bench which is standing on the street, then the people who are usually sitting on the bench, they will get directly and immediately involved in this process. But in any case, it's good to start with this group of leaders and actually get them also educated, so to speak, for participation. We have to realize that also people have to learn how to discuss, how to cooperate, how to exchange ideas, and they not necessarily know upfront how to actually openly discuss certain issues and then reach certain consensus. This is also the first thing which they have to go through. Second thing, we have to understand that there is always something called the silent minority of the people who are not necessarily taking part in the process, but who in this or that way might be involved. So we should find ways of involving them, like in example, for some sort of sociological surveys or any other way of involving them, just in order to get the opinions not only of those who actually have time to come to the meetings, but also of those who actually are sitting somewhere at home. I can remember once I was working on a strategic plan for some rural municipality in Poland, and we ended up with a fantastic local education development strategy, because only teachers had time to participate in the meetings, basically speaking, right? So, sorry guys, I mean, this is not the way of doing the proper planning, right? But this is exactly what actually happened over there, right? The third thing is media. I mean, we have to understand that media are on our side in this case. They are getting interested in these things, and they want to get involved. And finally, this is, we have to understand that transparency is crucial to the whole process, and that actually to making outcomes of the meetings available for the local community is very important for that. So as I said, in case of the post-transition countries, the demand for public participation is extensively and rapidly growing. There is also the growing mistrust to local planning and municipal management elites. And also, there is a kind of general understanding that no planning or development decision actually could be made without the consent of the people concerned or the people involved. Doesn't matter whether they are representing the general economic interests of the city or whether they are just looking after their own background. Okay, I mean, we have to understand that this is basically the case. So what are the consequences? First of all, the civil society is getting developed, of course, successfully, thanks to that. But in realities of this lack of political and democratic culture, it might get wrong, so to speak, in a little way, so to speak. Secondly, lack of the democratic tradition leads towards conflicts and not necessarily towards proper development of the whole thing. Basically, it means it's not enough to install democracy, you also have to make people aware of how that works and how actually to use this new tool called democracy, especially local democracy. And finally, also the local elites and the local management teams and mayors and planners, they also have to be part of the process, and they also have to understand that without people's consent, it's hard to push any planning decision forward these days, right? I mean, this is a kind of very important thing. But in order to make all of that happen, it is, I think, very important to understand that actually we have to reach the method of allowing, on one hand, full participation of the local community, and on the other hand, to get the process completed in due time and involve everyone who could potentially take the floor in this whole process involved. So in our case, we have basically adopted the so-called strategic planning methodology, which is basically based on the 3 key questions, which I guess each of us you know. And the idea was to base the whole process on the so-called charrette type of workshops, which means that in a sequence of the meetings, we are trying to go through the whole process, discussing and adopting particular parts of the whole thing, using very different techniques for that, including voting, public discussions, surveys, and all this kind of those things. And here are a couple of pictures showing the very heavy involvement of all the people. By the way, I have my own personal theory that in every case you have to have an older lady with a big handbag, and she's really the head of the whole process, right? And I have to tell you that, I mean, this lady on the right, wow, this was something, I have to tell you, right? So in that case, we can actually think about the structure of the possible process. I'm not going to go into the details, but basically there is a preparatory stage, then there is a stage of developing workshops themselves, and then we are actually discussing the results in the form of the final document, which actually is edited afterwards. So let me now focus within the remaining 2 or 3 minutes of my presentation on some selected case studies. I'd like to speak about 3 of them. About Katowice workshop, which is about reshaping the so-called Korfanty Avenue. I'm going to show you in a minute what that something is. Secondly, this will be about redevelopment of the public spaces in one of our smaller cities of Starogardenski. It's basically the size of Buda, so it's more or less that type of structure. And also the third one is replanning Gdansk city center. So first we go to Katowice. You might have heard about that because this is the place where COP is going to happen this year, this December. So this ecological forum of the UN. And basically it's going to happen, this COP is going to happen in the huge new center which is developed here on this place. And we were talking about this avenue. The idea was to build a highway cutting across the city, but they only had money enough to build this little portion. So this is what they have done. So the idea was to actually reshape the whole thing and actually to redo this whole transportation network which was developed in the 70s. This is how that looks like. As you can see, this is a big street which is pretty empty and unwelcoming, so to speak. So actually the plan was made to develop this street, or to redevelop actually this street, although the plan and it was made in a purely technocratic way, which means we did have the mayor's decision to start making it, then there was an architectural competition, then there was a planning competition, then there was a selection of the developer who will do that, and suddenly a big problem, right? People didn't like it, basically speaking, right? And nobody knew why. I mean, mayor was showing this drawing, showing, look how fantastic it's gonna look like, and so on. Why don't you want that? And people just didn't want it. So we have organized a workshop, which basically provided us with two answers. First of all, people love to be consulted upfront, not afterwards, and this public participation has to influence extensively the regular planning or architectural design procedures for places like that. So this is not gonna to happen as it used to happen before. And the second thing, which is also very important, is that in some cases people don't say what they want, but in some cases people say what they do not want, okay? And in this particular case, you might be surprised or not, but people actually said, you know what, we like this street to be that wide. Our question was, how come, you know? I mean, it is not interesting, it's not nice. And they said, yes, but you know, our city is not that huge, and the size of the street means our city is great. You might say this was very naive, okay? But that's, you know, I mean, on the other hand, when you think twice and 3 times and 4 times, it brings you the conclusion that, well, maybe indeed there is some issue about that, right? So maybe you should plan for the street in order to make people proud of their city and not to have their street diminish to the role of one of the plenty small streets that nobody is interested in. Another case is the case of Starogard Gdański, which is, sorry for the Polish, this is the network of the public spaces over there, including the main market square and including one of the avenues, which actually have been replanned using this kind of participatory method. And actually, this was made on the basis of the series of those workshops when we were consulting all the design steps with the local community, and it's up and running. It's just, you know, finished and will be opened this week or next week. Well, we have local elections 2 weeks from now from Poland, so obviously the mayor wants to have the whole thing open before the local elections, right, for the obvious reasons. But what is important is that this is actually done. And then was replanning of the Gdansk city center. This was a very interesting project which was sponsored by the Soros Foundation. And actually the idea was to develop the planning policy for the whole city center. So this was much more, so to speak, complicated and complex issue. But also it turned out that it's possible to do it. And then the outcome, which you can see in here, of course, was made using also some professional planning practice. And this was used to modify the municipal plans for the Gdansk city center. So what are the conclusions? First of all, we have to realize that public participation is one of the possible tools and which is used nowadays in order to discuss the possible planning solutions. And it's associated with the direct involvement of people in the decision-making process. It's very important to understand that this is the case. Second thing, in case the solid results have to be achieved, so not only to have discussion for the sake of having a discussion, but really in order to reach some kind of conclusion, you need to structure this discussion in a certain way, allowing on one hand professionals' participation in that, but on the other hand also discussing of all the conclusions with the participation or with the presence of all the possible stakeholders. So that's why those good results could be achieved through the series of the planning workshops. And finally, I would say there is a need for so-called strategic approach in this process. And also what is very important is that both the scope of the participation processes and results associated, as well as group of stakeholders involved, they have to be defined locally. There are no blueprints, unfortunately, but only there are people who have certain experience. And even the bad experience is also the good experience because it basically tells you how not to proceed with certain things. So thank you very much for your patience. I had some laughs on the way, which means you are not sleeping, and this was the idea. And so thank you very much for your attention. And as Nupur, as I said, asked me to lead some part of the whole thing, so I'd like to ask the next speaker right now. I'm not sure who is that. Okay, if you could please use that back door and find your way up here. And if I can ask our technical colleague to help us with the presentation. Thank you. And I think we will have time for questions and answers and the discussion afterwards, right? In the end. Okay, all right. Thank you. Oops, sorry. 10 minutes. Okay. I'm sorry, I have overused my time a little bit, but I hope you do excuse me for that, right?
One of these.
Okay, and then this one.
Yeah.
Oh, you're back so quick. So good afternoon, and thank you very much for the opportunity for me to share our work in these sessions. I'm Mahesti, and I'm working with UNUIS, which is based in Tokyo. My presentation today is about part of our ongoing work looking at the role of the community-based planning in the housing sectors, using the case of Surabaya, Indonesia as an example. Just to give you a context on the overall project that we are working on, the project is funded by the government of Japan, focusing on the sustainable consumption and productions and its linkage to other SDGs, in particular related to energy, clean waters, sustainable cities, climate change, and also on the partnerships. Housing is one of the focus of the project, along with the eco-labeling, energy and foods. But so where are we in this discussion of the non-state actors and community in these works? First of all, when we look at the whole supply chain, we realize that we also have to look at the role of the non-state actors, including community and businesses. Second, we realize that many of the new approaches and technology that come along with the sustainable development, and in this case, in our research, is resource efficiency, consumption and productions, are quite new to the people, especially people from the emerging economies. So we wanted to understand how community actually can play a role in accepting sustainable development approach in their day-to-day life. So in this regard, on this paper, discuss three main topics. First is community-based planning, resource efficiency, and social acceptance. To be more detailed, the paper is presented in threefold. The first is looking at the possibility of linkage between community-based planning and resource efficiency. How community-based planning can actually advance resource efficiency by identifying the level of acceptance of the people. By doing so, we are trying to understand the factors affecting the acceptance of the measures that being presented. And in the end, the idea was to examine how non-state actors actually, through community-based planning, can influence the acceptance. So for the community, we specifically looking at the community who have experienced lifestyle changes. The reasoning behind was that at least in Indonesian context, there is an argument that social fabrics or community participation is traditionally better in traditional settlements than the housing complexes, because housing complex is quite new. With the social fabrics as one of the driving force behind the acceptance, we would like to see how it plays in this role in this regard. This is the, we look at three types of acceptance. The first is socio-political, community, and market. But for today's presentations, I will only discuss on the finding we got from our data collection and analysis on the community acceptance. So in general, we collect data through household surveys, interviews, and focus group discussions in 3 housing complexes across Surabaya. Analysis was done through regressions, and just shortly on the socio-political acceptance, we did a document analysis and interview to get better explain on the phenomena. We used a timeline between 1999 to present. This graph is really well known in the topic of the participation and collaborative behavior, because basically across community in both emerging and developed economies, we found communities operates within the spectrum of communications and to empower us, and depending on the level of information, dialogue, and partnership that they have. But the general consensus that participatory practice is actually led to better planning outcomes. Yet, it is very contextual, it is not easily replicable, and the rate of the success or failures varies across community. So based on this understanding, we look at the literature on how the role of the community context actually affect the development planning and implementations. So past research already identified the contextual factors such as past collaborative experience, as you say, bad or good experience is experience that should be counted for. And politics and history of community values and norms, demographic, economic conditions, and geography all influence implementation activities at different scale. These factors also affect differently across planning process, implementation, and assessment. These contextual factors were then brought us to the role of the acceptance. When we first did a quick mapping of the status of the waste management and other resource efficiency measures currently being in place across the housing complexes in Surabaya, we found out that the level of the success actually varies greatly. There are communities that are highly successful, and there are those who fail to maintain the implementation and the management. One reason perhaps because people perceive risk or importance of this new approach are related with their familiarity, knowledge, and information depth. Another reason is we're trying to explain that the people behavior can be explained in terms of two dominant interests. The first is the economic gain, and the second is in the acceptance. So these contextual factors then brought us to this. I will not go into details, but these 4 themes are the themes that we are used to construct this research, trying to understand the roles of community-based planning through participations. We look at the components of sustainable housing and sustainable consumption and productions. We also look at the governance and the planning system, as these two influence greatly on the planning process, especially as they have continuously changed over the years. Just to give you more context about the community-based housing activities in Surabaya, in general, there are more activities in the community with individual houses, because that's the way the traditional settlements, and you have an individual houses, regardless how small it is, than those living in the public housings. For example, we just start building our housing complex in 1989, and it's only one, and then the next one will be built in end of 1990s. So housing development and improvements, such as Kampung Improvement Program, for example, take place more broadly on the communities, and regardless of formal or informal. In the public housing, these activities are largely community planning for implementation of basic services. And just also the context on the community governance structures in Indonesia, and so also the line between the timeline underneath was the year that saw the major regulatory frameworks affecting the community level planning, and also the breakthrough related to environmental-based measure being introduced in Indonesia. We have a decentralization in 1999 in politics, administration, and fiscal, all at the same time, affecting the way the planning is being carried out on the ground, but it wasn't until 2007 that we formally changed the planning system into more decentralized way. Just a quick overview on the basic information of Surabaya and our housing samples. As you can see on the waste management, they're quite varied, although they were implemented along at the same time. 2 of them, they do reduce, reuse, and recycle, but not the other one. So the location of the housing complexes, 2 in the city center and 1 on the urban periphery close to the industrial complex. And these are the variables that we use to measure the acceptance, using components from sustainable housing and sustainable consumption and production, divided into 3 themes: economic efficiency, social opportunities, and environmental protections. The data collected is perception-based, and we ask the respondent to express their perception comparable to their perception to their previous dwelling. This is the respondents' information. As you can see, around 65% do not have regular salary earning. Most of them move from informal settlements or resettle from squatter settlements. On the left is the overall acceptance. I'll just go through the preliminary results. The overall altitude of the resource efficiency acceptance is, we found that this is tied to the social economic factors of sustainable housings. The better these factors are, the stronger community acceptance toward resource efficiency measures. The community satisfaction over the housing quality and the quality of life is also influenced the acceptance. the involvement in decision making, we found it doesn't necessarily translate to the satisfaction over the process. Because participation, we found out that it can be made compulsory or peer pressures in Indonesia. But the positive attitude toward community participations, for example, self-initiative and level of satisfaction over the process, it actually affect the acceptance toward the measures being implemented. Okay, I'll end my talk here. Thank you very much.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Yes.
Welcome everyone. I'm Nora Swedi from Ministry of Municipality and Environment. I'm an urban planner. I'm here with my colleague Engineer Naji. We'll talk about setting up a contemporary planning system for Qatar urban future. Our aim research is to consolidate good governance and to deliver a cool planning for Qatar urban future and apply a new urban agenda 2016 plus sustainable development goals 2030 regarding the adoption of enable the local community through the community participation and ensure consultation with all community segments. We will take you through a little bit of introduction, a brief of Qatar, a brief on Qatar planning experience and the lesson learned, element of Qatar planning system, innovative mechanism and tool, and we'll end up with recommendation and conclusion. So in this presentation, we'll highlight a creative tools and mechanism to assess the emerging Qatar planning system and to provide set of recommendations to develop the professional performance for urban planning department in the context of both a new urban agenda 2016 and sustainable development goals 2013. So we'll take off now. We'll fly to Qatar. We are located in the Middle East, in the Gulf. Our capital is Doha. The population is around 2.6 million in hectare. The country is divided into 8 municipalities as an administrative division. If we'll talk about a brief of our experience in planning in Qatar, actually we are just have approved our master plan latest in this year, so we are new in the planning. This is the image is talking about the history of developing the country. This is the capital city is Doha.
So how our country is developed. So this is the image that show you this one. And this one guide us to question what is the experience that we get from this fast growth in the urban and both in urban and population. We observe that most of the planning projects carried out during the 70s up to 2000 are piecemeal projects. This told us that there's many consulted has been work on many projects in Doha to be developed. Also, there's an absence of the stakeholder consultation framework and also absence of approval urban planning legislation. The question is raised again, how the country has dealt with this fast growth in population and urban development. The country adopts a comprehensive strategy, as we call it, Qatar National Vision 2030, with 4 main pillars focused on human development, social development, economic development, and environmental development. I will hand over the mic to my colleagues, Engineer Naji, who has experience in Qatar more than 14 years, and he will brief you on our new planning system in 4 minutes.
Thank you very much. I wish that he did the show already.
خلاص شغالة يا باشمهندس.
Okay. Hi everybody, thank you Nora. In light of Qatar planning system and planning experience and lessons learned along the 3 decades, as my colleague Nora pointed out, this part will describe the 5 key elements we set it up a decade ago, that we start to set it up since decade ago. The first one, Qatar Planning Master Plan Project. I'll tell you a small story, 2 minutes only, to tell you how we set this system 10 years ago. From the experience, we learned that it should be a directive master plan to direct the all future development, physical development along the 25 years from now. So we commissioned one international consultant to prepare a Qatar far-reaching socio-economic, environmental and urban planning for the next 25 years. The most important outcomes, the strategic document, which is the Qatar National Development Framework, the Municipal Spatial Development Plan for each single municipality, which consists of a suite of zone regulations, regional central centers, and zoning plans for each single municipality. At the same time, we commissioned the consultant. We start to build our local team in Urban Planning Department, UPD. We call it Qatar National Master Plan Section. And we try to accommodate all the planning disciplines, socio-economic, environmental, urban planners, regional planners to be in the department to direct and guide the consultant. Once the consultant finishes his work, they will start to implement, and this is exactly what's happened. The third one, which is very crucial to guarantee that our plans to be implemented in the reality, it should be a legal framework. And this is one of the most important projects we are doing now. It is in the final stage, which is Qatar Urban Planning Legislation. It is now in the final drafts to draft the final stages to do it. In order to guarantee that we are doing a reality, planning for the reality, we should, based upon the most updated database, reliable and documented. Through the bridges we built across the stakeholders, we obtained the data they have, and we built upon it, and develop a customized GIS viewer application to enable the planners to have a right decision based upon the most updated recent data. As well, we established a capacity building strategy. It's actually draft, and we started at sort of train courses. We started through this to build the local capacity of the planning staff, and even exceed this for the municipalities. Based upon this planning system, this part, the fourth part, presents several tools and mechanisms that can be contributed. We think, me and Nora, through several discussions, that it will effectively in consolidating and supporting the newly emerging Qatar planning system. One of them, some of them already on board, and some we think that can be adopted. The first one, setting up Qatar National Master Project website. It is under the ministerial portal. And by setting this one, we will prove that we adopt the principle of transparency to enable the local community from all stakeholders to have access what we are achieving, what our initiatives, what our issues in planning. The next one, of course, we appreciate very much the role of media. Of course, all of these techniques and others are in the paper, so I don't want to go into details to focus upon the most crucial areas. This one, marketing and reach out the Qatar National Master Plan project. It is a unit newly stated in the beginning of this year, parallel to the launching of Qatar National Master Plan regulations. And it is which is considered as a focal point between us in planning department and Qatar National Master Plan project and the consultant and the other public, general public to answer their inquiries and technical points regarding the application of the zoning regulations. The most important thing, adopting some stakeholder consultation approach that match with our local traditions in Qatar. Some of them is in a public space or in a busy commercial complex. We set of such stickers. We adopt. We think that it can work regarding our traditions, can work in our traditions in Qatar. To put such blackboards and put some stickers, the community, the local community can fill this, and through this we can inform them, we can know what about their priorities and all this stuff. Another, the last one, the negotiation. The country is very interested that to give a crucial part for the private sector to play. That is, so I think that we think that in this paper that negotiation skill to be provided for the planners in the planning department can enable them to negotiate with the developers, great developers who has a big chunk of land in order to make a compromise, not to contradicting with our regulations, not to be at the expense of the community. So, to finalize the recommendation and conclusion, we think, I'll say it in very quickly, finally this part aims for proposing several recommendations that we, myself and colleague Noura, believe can contribute effectively in supporting our newly emerging Qatar planning system, as well as enhancing our department and QMP project section performance to be one of the most outstanding planning entity, not in the Gulf, but globally. One of them is ensure that all relevant stakeholders to be involved in the plan-making process. The second one, and I see the opportunity that our bosses here, I hope that to approve and ratify the Qatar planning legislation, which is very crucial to enforce applying what we put in plans in reality. Restructure the organizational chart of Qatar National Master Plan section. Of course, we have a suite of experts and local staff, but of course we need more. This is what we think, that if we have for every single planning discipline, environmental planner, infrastructure planner, transportation planner, it will help too much to act as a focal point between our department and the others. Set up a municipal Qatar National Master Plan unit in the municipality. In our system, it is centralized. Okay, it is a centralized system, but the municipal can play a role here. If we set such kind of unit in each single municipality, it will be acting as a role or a focus contact point between them and us. Conduct ongoing updating of the planning database. Of course, as long as we are updated ourselves with the most recent updated database, will be in a position that nobody can say you are planning for other world. No, we are planning from the reality. The last thing I'd like to say, finally, myself and my colleague Noura are looking forward to your fruitful feedback, comments, hopefully that to help us to develop the newly emerging planning system we have in Qatar, and welcome you in advance in Qatar 2022, and thank you very much. Sorry, I have a very restricted time, but I hope that I convey our message.
No.
No.
This one. How to make it full screen. So, hello everyone. I represent Russia, and I will first just introduce myself, because I work for a company which is neither an institution, a research institution, or a government agency. We are a private company, and we make solutions to all problems related to city development, and there we involve knowledge from all over the world, from different research institutions, whatever we need. So the problem we are solving at the moment was commissioned to us by Russian Mortgage Corporation, and it's related to reinvention of housing stock for Russia, because here you can see we still continue to build new housing according to the rules that were established in the middle of the 20th century, and it doesn't match anymore the expectations of modern citizens. It's not for the modern society which is designed now. And the problem is that what you see on the left now is being demolished, and what you see on the right is going to come instead of it to be demolished in 50 years. So this is the problem we are going to solve now. The question for this research was what has to be instead of this outdated housing, first of all, and then how to change the rules of the game so that it could appear in Russian cities. And to know what housing has to look like, we first have to ask the users. So we did a lot of anthropological and sociological research, and all research in fields related to city planning, such as transport, housing market, all that stuff with international and Russian companies. And we managed to find out 8 major problems that people in the cities of Russia meet every day. First of all, mainly people lack services and retail
in walking distance to their houses, because it's not very mixed use, the residential areas in Russia. Then the residential areas are not really well connected to the other parts of the cities, and cities with population over 100,000, they mainly experience traffic problems. Workplaces are away from residential areas. It means that people have to commute to their work, but 58% of residents we asked, they would like to walk to their job. So there is a problem of feeling unsafe in the open space. There is a problem of ecology and bad air quality because of traffic pollution. And we also don't have enough of comfortable apartments, because only 1/4 of residents can have a personal bedroom per each family member. There is no visual identity in residential areas, as you could see. And we are continuing to multiply those problems, because we build on green fields outside of the city. So based on that, we could manage to find 6 principles that we have to follow to make new developments. And it's about functional diversity and mixed use. It's about mid-rise and human scale open spaces to provide social control. This is about different mobility modes and variety of routes, high road network density that will allow to commute in the city more comfortable and easily. And it's about different landscape design that provides safety in the streets and in the open space. It's about introducing different housing typologies into the planning system, and making flexible layouts so that you could replan your apartment in case you need it. And it's planning on the basis of small urban blocks instead of huge blocks, so that you could, so that the urban fabric could develop on its own without huge interventions like we see it now. And then we came to what Mr. Newman called the urban fabric theory in the previous lecture, but I've never heard of that, but we invented that in our team, because we tried to make different models of urban fabric for people who have different preferences in their way of living, which means that if you, and it all depends on density and mixed use basically, because the denser you build, the more people you have, the more flows you have to go to shops, services and retail, so you stimulate this mixed-use development by densifying the urban fabric. So if you would like to have your personal garden and 2 parking places for your cars, you will live in some kind of low-rise detached housing areas, and then you will have to go shopping by car. If you would like to have an apartment and then you use public transport and do your everyday shopping in the supermarket. This is a kind of urban model that we invented, and we have a central model that is much more pedestrian, and it's related to the areas where you don't need a car at all, because you don't, first of all, don't have a place to park it, and then you don't need it so much because everything is at hand. So those are the 3 models based on different types of transportation and different types of urban life patterns. And then how to implement them into practice. We have developed a toolkit that would help any planner to make a design project based on those models. It comprises of 10 elements and 50 parameters that are applied to separate elements or to relations between them. For example, you have a street. The street section is limited depending on its role in the planning of the area, and then you have, depending on the car flow, the interval how you plant trees along the street, because trees reduce noise and air pollution. So on the basis of those models, you can also improve the existing fabric, because for example, if you add some density to the detached housing which exists in our city, you will provide more mixed use. If you divide micro-rayons into smaller blocks, then you provide better road network, and you will provide more places for frontages along the street where you can place street retail. We also introduce climate comfort solutions into this study, because in Russia it's very cold. It may be very cold in the winter and it may be very hot in summer, so you have to arrange open space so that people could spend time there all year round, and also to store water into the ground so that you could not spend so much money for watering the plants in summer, and you could store snow when it's falling down and not take it away out from the city, which is quite expensive. And also how to prevent the residential areas from noise and pollution from traffic. And so what we are doing next, so this is a real project which is now, it is going to be released in the beginning of next year. We are going to release 8 books of manuals for designers and for city planners and for city administrations. And we are now ready to change the legal framework for development of residential areas, because we know what makes it impossible to build the way we think is necessary to build. And we are doing pilot projects. It's real cities and urban codes for real cities and master plans for urban for real cities. And here you can see a winning entry from an international competition for Kaliningrad, which is also a part of our pilot project program. Thank you. And do I have to take it off? Yeah.
So that was a very, where's Nora? Okay. So that was a very interesting session. I'm sorry to mess your presentation because I was forced to go to a meeting and I just attend part of it and I came quickly. So I catch up with your conclusion. Thank you for a wonderful keynote speech. I just want to remind you with what I felt about the rest of the papers. Mahisti, I think it was very interesting to shed light on the whole notion of the social acceptance in the planning process and how sometimes we have this tendency to accept the community, or in some other cases we put even obstacle towards listening to this voice. Nora and Naji, I think you narrated for us a very interesting story, particularly I love the point that both of you highlighted, which is the speed of the progress and the process. And therefore, literally, you need a mechanism, you need a matrix to deal with that. And for Katrina, I love the work of Strelka Institute. I just came back, I had a wonderful time, and I was excited about the headquarters and the creative energy in the place. And I like very much that in all of your projects, not necessarily you, but the whole institute is focusing on creating a mechanism, an overall holistic kind of guidelines, but at the same time very flexible, and it would give freedom, creative freedom to urban designers and the planners and architects and so on and so forth. So I think it was a beautiful blend of papers, and we'll open the floor for discussions, questions, comments, whatever you guys feel. Any volunteers? Here you go.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Andis from Riga, Latvia. And my question firstly goes to Piotr, actually, that it's sort of easy to motivate the people to participate if it's against something. We love to be against this project, that project, then people come and discuss and come to some solutions. But do you have some examples from your practice where you also somehow motivated people who sort of liked the plan, liked the solution to come and participate in the public discussions or wrote something, so something about this positive part, not just that something against?
Well, thank you very much for this question. I think this is key issue with the whole participation thing. I mean, how to get people motivated for the, so to speak, positive discussion about that. But I would say that in a lot of the examples that I was dealing with, always the question was, listen, people, if you do not get involved, the decision will be made without you. So, you know, you choose, basically speaking, right? And in many cases, people basically come because they are just interested. And of course, this is the issue of the proper advertisement, this is of the proper presentation, and so on. What is interesting, it works better in the smaller communities, in the smaller cities. So in the city like Buda, I'm more than sure there will be many more people participating in some events because the social network is more tight and people are more aware of that, what is happening around and what can happen around, right? In the bigger cities, it is more complicated. But also in this case, so to speak, this kind of notion of if you are not involved, then the decision will be made without your participation is really doing the job. And the second thing which I think is also very important is that the way that actually people see that their opinion is not just I like it, I don't like it, but they can really propose some kind of solutions, and these solutions are really included, it really pays back. But it means you have to basically really educate people for the participation, and it's not like giving lessons, but it is actually about showing by the real-life evidence that their opinion actually matters. Once they feel that, they get involved.
Hi, my name is Lena Dybtsina. I'm from Nord University Business School from Buda here. I have two questions to you, Piotr, and to you, Ekaterina. The first question to Ekaterina, it's very interesting what you've been presenting, but I was also wondering if it's like you've been presenting very well what was going on in Russia, but I was interested in, have you been done some kind of comparative research of some such kind of framework, what you've been presenting, or guidelines within other countries, and how it can be helping Russia or maybe not helping? Just one question. And then to Piotr, the question is, when you were presenting this strategic approach for this public participation, and then of course the post-transition countries are very interested, and you've been on this control countries, command countries, and so on. But when you were presenting, it was very reminded me about this about what the mechanisms that you've been using. It was reminding me of this how do you call it, stakeholder engagement dialogue procedures. And I'm wondering, isn't it what you've been doing is actually this kind of stakeholder engagement dialogue? Because when you think about strategic planning, it's like people think more about like corporative business, developing the strategies and so on and so forth. Or maybe, yeah, that was my kind of, I think, is the room for the dialogue in these decisions in post-transition countries? Thank you.
So yeah, I answer first. Well, in fact, of course, we did a lot of benchmarking on those guidelines which different countries introduced, but mainly there are no national guidelines. Mainly they are municipal. And our kick-off document was British Urban Design Compendium, which actually turned different way the situation in housing market in Britain. But we designed an absolutely unique thing which solves the unique problem. This is what we usually do. We never copy-paste anybody's experience. We always landed on the local ground, wherever it is, in any part, not only in Russia.
Well, thank you very much for this question, because actually the method which I was describing about and which we are actually using is a combination of both. So it means, I mean, on one hand, it involves all stakeholders into a dialogue. So literally, this is exactly what you are referring to. But on the other hand, it's not just about creating space for dialogue, but this is creating a kind of clear path towards achieving some final results, taking some real decisions. So it's basically guiding all these stakeholders dialogue through the particular steps in the process of the strategic planning for the particular solution, right? And it doesn't matter whether this is the replanning of some square or street, or whether this is urban regeneration plan for the city, whether this is urban master plan for the city. There is always the stage in identifying the stakeholders within the existing structure and how to assess it, what is good, what is wrong, what they like, what they don't like. In many questions, they fight in between because something which is good for some people is not so good for the other. And then, you know, what are the visions, goals, and finally, how this whole thing should be drafted and implemented in the end, right? So, as I said, it's a combination of both. It's of this kind of strategic planning methodology, maybe not in a corporate way of that, but in a way of the method of planning with this stakeholders dialogue, as you have mentioned. So, it's both.
If you are talking about public participation, you mean that you will involve only the community, all sectors, all segments of community, all sectors of community. Okay.
So it means also businesses,
private and community sector, as well as the public authorities. Yes. Okay.
Any more questions? You know, given the fact that you're holding the mic, Dr. Nagy, I want to ask you a question.
Ask.
And also, because it's also related to the beautiful dialogue that happened now. Because I've noticed in your presentation with Nora that you also talked about the stakeholder consultation, but also you alerted us to the cultural factors and cultural difference.
Yes.
And how to really be sensitive to what kind of social structure and cultural preferences.
Yes, I will extend in this.
Thank you.
Actually, Qatar, as a very conservative community in the Arabic Gulf states, it is not open, and it is sort of not democratic society as known in the West. But in order to to organize public meetings, to take the feedbacks from the community, it is not common. The social institution there, society institution, not strong enough. Although we have what is so-called sort of parliament called shura, to be appointed, and some of them are elected, and especially when we are coming to inform people about the raise awareness for the community, and our trials in the ministry to raise awareness for the whole community by setting the website, for instance. I know that maybe for the Western countries, it is known, and it is what you're, okay, but imagine, take into account that we are just 1 decade of setting up such a system. It takes time and planning, as all you know from your experience, that it is a totally educative process. So the community, when we are talking about Qatar society, it is, I've been there since more than 20 years. It is totally jump regarding for not only physical, we are talking about the society. We now, the country has its vision and totally accepted by all the community authorities, and we are applying all such kind of vision. We have many international universities located in Doha, and you know, from the, as you, I can inform you that the Qatari citizen can travel. This is considered one of the most wealthy citizen can travel regarding the number of trips being. So he is seeing what's happening in the real world around it, in Europe, in America, and Australia, and of course think that why not my country to be like that. So a huge, and don't talk about the maybe less than 1% from the community, from the Qatari population, are ignorant. Yani you are, and within 1 decade from now, as heard from one of the senior in the statistics department, say that we will have 0%, not only from the ignorant people, as well as ignorant of computer. This is great. They are achieving actually fantastic in this regard.
Any more questions?
Hi, this is Mbarak Al-Nuaimi. I'm actually from Qatar, and I like too much the way that you take the decision while you try to share the public sector of decision, because this will have a great effect that the public sector will see that they are sharing the development and they are apart from this. It's not a matter of just take this. But the question is, I don't know if you answered, but I didn't get it. To let this public sector to share you or in this discussion or dialogue to take the decision, I'm not sure, but I think it's better to educate them or at least prepare them to let them see or take the right decision. Because it's not a matter of this will be good or will not be good. In this case, everyone will take or will think about his own profit. Maybe will not think about other public or the city. So I think it would be better if you educate them. I mean, it's not. It's a kind of way to tell them before to come and discuss what they have to concentrate on while they are taking their decision. So do you think, or did you do something like this? I mean, prepare them before coming and take their decision. Thank you.
As far as...
No, it was for you.
Okay.
It's a question about Qatar. And,
okay, okay.
Oh, for both of them? Oh, sure.
Okay. Okay. So as far as I understood from you, that educative process, it is a long term. And not only it happens between day and night, but to raise awareness and to involve all segments of community in to have a role, to have a say in the planning. We haven't started yet totally, unless we sit with some private companies as well as the public authorities. But the civil institution, as you know, that it is not strong enough in Qatar, but it is growing. Some semi-public and community sectors, like one organization for family. It is, I think it's coming, and the media has a very crucial role in this, to educate and focus upon such kind of projects. And I have my own experience when we went to one of the villages and they invite representatives of the local community. We inform them about the projects taking place, and we want to hear from you. I'm asking them, what about your concerns regarding the project? Actually, what is fantastically that they raise many mechanisms. Why not to do that? Why not to do that? And we convey the whole thing of proposals and arguments to our responsible and reflected in a plan. Yes, the plan has been adopted, but at least we are in the process from time to time. It takes place, it takes time, but hopefully it will work.
I mean, there are two things. First of all, we have to realize that every society which is under certain transformation, and I don't know much about Qatar. I've been just once for a couple of days, so basically my understanding of that, what is the Qatari society, is not that in-depth, so to speak. But I mean, as far as I could see some other countries in the region, I could see that this is a conservative society, the very traditional social structures, which are evolving right now dramatically, due to a lot of different influences and pressures, so to speak, right? And this is to some extent similar to that what we can actually observe in countries like Central and Eastern Europe. Of course, different context, different culture, different history, but basically the people who are coming from isolation and a kind of home-based experience of living towards public life, right? And I'm not speaking about the political reforms, which is a completely different issue, but what I'm speaking about is basically the changing the attitude. People basically start getting interested in that what is happening around. They start realizing this is not only the role of the government to decide for them what to do and what not to do with the space or with the public space or with whatever they have, but also that they have something to say about that they have their needs, they have their desires, and they actually want to be heard, basically speaking, right? And in this case, as I said, I think it's very important to understand that upfront in order to make sure that the whole process of changing the way planning is delivered is somehow controlled or somehow designed to some extent, right? I mean, that's why I was saying, about this strategic approach, because this basically helps in civilizing the whole process, and instead of, running wild, I mean, it goes more or less smoothly and can help in achieving some kind of results in the proper time with certain amount of the professional control over that what is happening, right? So, of course, this demands a lot of goodwill, a lot of openness on the government side, but also it needs understanding that if we do not do that, the reality will reach us, and if we don't allow people or invite people to do that, people will just claim this right on their own, sooner or later.
I'll give you another example, Engineer Mubarak, regarding when we launched the Qatar National Master Plan zoning regulations. Before that, they are coming to our department, okay, in order to develop this bunch of land, what about the regulations applied? And they are trying, I will not talk about the lobbying in order to get the best benefits from that. Once we launch this on website, everything is clear. And for me, as I'm working for this owner to be working for this unit, customer service unit, regarding the application and the problem, the consultant and the local community, trying to tell them, okay, if you want, say, to develop a retail, everyone will want to make the maximum benefit of the regulation. Okay, what will be the impacts on the supply and demand of retails? All of the system will collapse. And some of them, okay, he's saying, okay, you're right, but if you were me, I bought this bunch of land about 10 million, and in order to develop. Of course, in any planning system, some lose and some wins. And we think by the time we are conveying the message that it is not only you as a community in the planning arena, there is a private sector, there is a public authorities plus the community, and should be a balance between the whole three sectors. Thank you.
All right. Any more questions? Yes, sure.
Hello there, Jeff Prince from the UK. It's reassuring to hear all the examples of community involvement and public participation in taking forward development in different regions, parts of the world. I hope we don't reach the situation we've got to in the UK, where we're a very, as you know, democratic country. We have a fairly open, free press. People say what they want. But we've reached a state of paralysis in terms of moving development forward now. It takes years to get a big project forward, like a new terminal, a runway at Heathrow Airport, for example, a new rail system through the country, HS2, or even new housing developments. Everybody objects. No one supports anything anymore. Everybody wants things to stay as they are for today and not to change things for tomorrow or in very rare circumstances. So I think whilst I'm a big supporter of consultation and involvement of the community in decision making, I think just be wary, everybody, of what happens as you become more democratized and people participate more. We get to a stage of paralysis now. We can't do anything, hardly. And well, not only that, the feedback you get from individuals, some of it's pretty vile, pretty horrendous through Facebook and the social networks. People write what they want in a fairly unformatted language, shall we say. So I just come at it from the view of a UK, which is fairly advanced in consultation, just to pass on a few words of don't know if it's warning or advice or what, but it's a big problem that we face now in trying to get investment into the country to do things, to move things forward.
Bahista, I want to comment on that because it's so related to the issue of acceptance, and this acceptance can be seen also the two ways, from the community and also from the planning and the authority.
Yeah, I mean, like, the topic itself, like, it has to be accepted. I mean, like, from our findings, that it has to be accepted first by the community before the community can start doing this, all the community participations. Because actually, without the acceptance, they will not, you know, like, they have no ownership on whatever they're working on. And actually, it took me to, I would like to ask questions from the panelists and also the audience, like, what is the roles of facilitators in this? Like, because like public participations, usually you manage to do it when you have a big projects, right? But when after the projects ends, usually participation fade out. So is there any experience on how to maintain this? Because when the project ends, it's actually you have to keep maintaining it, right? Is that?
I think, yeah. Before I want to comment, but I have two key words for you.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to deal with community participation as an event or as process? If it's an event, it's like a party. We're done with it. But if it's a process, it's endless, because planning is about life. Before you want to comment,
I think just 2 minutes on that. So I want to actually tie in what Jeff is also asking. And Piotr said that when you start a process, you're like, you want to participate, here's your chance. You don't want to do it, the process will go on. You know, and then your question on facilitation, Ali's comment on process or event, and Jeff's bit about paralysis. So somewhere, when I look at the projects that we've delivered, I feel what happens is that it's all tied in facilitation. While we're trying to be very respectful of people and we're trying to be very respectful of their views, there also has to be a leadership. And people have to believe that the leadership is true. You know, all those ethics have to be in place. But the leadership also has one quality which I see missing in a lot of projects, which is a bit of bravado. You know, that I have to see this project through, and people are going to say this and people are going to say that. I know that there are certain things which are good for the project, and I know there's certain things, like for a heritage project, I just said yesterday, someone said we want a swimming pool inside the heritage garden. Now you know that, you know, you wouldn't do that. So setting out that kind of a framework, ethical framework, having a little bit of bravado that you will face criticism whichever way you go. I mean, and that's the bottom line. But I think it's that bravado, it's the process, not just the event. I think Ali has an important point to make. And Piotr is saying that, you know, they should understand that they can't derail it. Just because they're saying this or that, which is what's happening in the UK, which they know that if they say this or that, the development won't take place, or it may not take place. So somewhere, that thing that, no, the development is going to take place. This is the time to guide it in some way or the other. And I think these are some ingredients of successful projects, very few in the world, but at least that's what I'm seeing from a practice view, that it's only when these ingredients come together that you're actually able to deliver a good project with adequate stakeholder participation and all of that. So just my 2 pennies worth of thoughts.
Speaking of successful projects, do you have certificates for the successful speakers? You have certificates?
But before we identify certificates, maybe I can comment to both things, okay? Yeah, so if possible, right? Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for the comment, but, you know, I mean, I still have a feeling that, I mean, it doesn't matter how developed the society is, in many cases, certain mistakes are still being made. Basically, that the government is confronting people with the projects which are already decided or which are supposed to be decided, instead of confronting people with the problems that have to be solved. And I think this is a small thing which makes big difference, right? I mean, if you want to put a new road through some district, people say, no, we don't want any road, right? But when you ask them, okay, how to solve the transportation problem, how you want to commute, then this is a completely different story, right? I mean, they start thinking and talking about that. And in some cases, they might end up the solution that actually the road is necessary over there, but it's their decision. It's not a decision which is being imposed on them by somebody else. I know that in case of Heathrow or any other, this kind of Stuttgart 21, or I mean, there are big projects around Europe which have been, so to speak, paralyzed by this kind of problems. But I mean, in this case, we always have to understand that first of all, that there is a problem which people have to be confronted with, and then this is the identification of stakeholders. I mean, if we speak about Heathrow, I mean, who are the stakeholders? Just the people who live next door? Well, yes, okay. I mean, they have their business, but this is, I mean, companies, economic development. I mean, the whole, probably half of UK is a stakeholder for that, not just a couple of thousands of people who are living right next door. Of course, they have a problem, and this can be solved. But I mean, you have to understand the stakeholders and the proper stakeholders of the whole thing, right? The second thing, you have to identify leaders, and I mean, especially if you speak about the municipal project, right? I mean, this is an issue of having some local leaders who are actually kind of constantly involved in this discourse, and then when you create a room for that, when you involve them, then it's a kind of constant project, a constant process of discussion. And of course, some new people may come up, some people will drop out for this or that reason, but in every case, it is happening, right? And finally, what I think is very important, this is a process, okay? It is not a one-time show, it is a process. If it is not a process, we will always have this kind of problem that somebody wants to build a road and then people say no, because it goes through my property, right? Or whatever.
Just a small comment, Dr. Ali, regarding the process. We are in Qatar documenting all the stakeholder consultation meetings, and at the end we produce a report, prepare a report, and to be presented to the higher authority to see that what are the most important decisions, critical and should be taken by the authorities. As a planners, we have a limit. At the authority, it will have impacts. And at the end of the day, such kind of decisions will be reflected to amend our plan. At the end of the day, to build such kind of consensus among us as a public authority responsible for issuing a planning and the other the other stakeholders.
Any final thoughts, Mahita, Katrina? Yeah, please, go ahead.
I also have a question, because we do a lot of public participation in different kind of projects in our company, and usually it's okay, you do involve public when you need ideas, because often it's a lot of information that you can use as a designer. And then you show them the sketch and discuss it and maybe improve it, but you never take their opinion as granted, because we are professionals, we have to think it over and produce our own solutions. So when people don't see their ideas in the final project, what do you do then? Because for me it was always a question, how do you then, is there a conflict or not?
From my own experience, I should put it clear and loud from the beginning that we are consulting with you in order to have your opinion. You are not only the only actors involved in the process. We should take into account the private sector. We should take into account the other types of stakeholders. But from time to time, if we are several meetings, sit with them and tell them, okay, based upon what we have come up with, these are the results. Not only just one meeting and bye-bye. No, we should keep on consulting with them until the final resolution of the proposed master plan to be accepted or to be presented for the community.
Okay, I hate to do that, but it's already 3:05, so thank you. Let's see for the great speakers.
We are starting with a colleague, Serene, who's going to be talking about, she's from Romania.
Yes.
She's going to be talking and making a presentation. Without further ado, we are starting, and we can discuss in the panel discussion at the end. So please start.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Serene, and I'm an urban planner and also an assistant professor at Jan Mink University in Bucharest, Romania. But I'm going to show you today a study that I made while working for Istanbul Metropolitan Planning Office, which is entitled Local Identities on Change, Urban Waterfront Regeneration Within the Global City of Istanbul. So my main research question was what lessons could be drawn from current practices exemplified by urban waterfront regeneration along Haliç, namely the Haliç Shipyard Conservation Projects, and how could these lessons inform new planning approaches that overcome current conflicts in Istanbul and beyond from a governance and planning process perspective. I had to assess both top-down but also bottom-up governance planning initiatives, governance forms, but also to evaluate the projects targeting the neighboring community, because this is a really common area to study when considering waterfront regeneration. A quick brief about the research design. It's important to mention that it was case study based and explanatory, and I had almost 30 interviews with planners involved and opposing to the project, but also 250 questionnaires with important stakeholders, and also a workshop within the neighborhood. Quick conceptual framework overview. So I have to agree with the shift between the managerial to entrepreneurial forms of governance that Harvey militates about, and also the introducing the new forms of governance, which sometimes promote good governance, but still they have a stakeholder position that we don't have to forget. And finally, planning as a strategic approach to governance, a normative perspective from Patsy Healy. Because most of the literature and the case studies we have and the theory, it's from Northwestern practice, I had to extract from different case studies analytical tools to see planning from a governance perspective. And there are legal form, decision-making process, actors and their relationships. And coming to the main case study, the area of research, Istanbul, Haliç, the Golden Horn. It's a 7.5 kilometer bay in the European side. And the last development, the Haliç Shipyard, with the backstage neighboring community. A quick brief of the history. I have to conclude it's a fragmentized waterfront that went to a rapid industrialization that created informal settlement, like in many examples in the backstage of this development. It's called Gecekondu in Turkish. And then it followed in the 1980s also with decentralization processes that happens all over the world. Of course, the industrialization that left mass unemployment in the backstage neighboring community, that's not resolved until today. The context of planning. I have to stress this part because it is important. We also talked about at this conference that planning at small scale and the power of the example is important and we can make a change. However, we shouldn't forget the whole context and the framework that we are working within. And here it is an important one that sets also mental barriers between planners and the society. So there is the legal framework, urban regeneration policies replacing the urban planning practices. There are several laws that enable the central government to appropriate land and to plan at local level. Of course, by 2000, we are facing also a process of configuring a new market-friendly and regulatory role of state. And just for you to have a picture of that, of what's happening. So we see a year 2000, and then it's like this. And for our study area, Haliç Shipyard Conservation Project, we can see that it's government-initiated. So Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality actually initiated and subsidized this project. Therefore, going to the project details, it had to be promising all the best for everyone, right? So then conservation of the buildings, under the law of conservation was on first plan because there are some monuments from the Ottoman era, but also ensuring green spaces and social activities for, remember, the backstage community that had informal settlements and not so good condition in public spaces, and participation of the locals of the area. Today, the project faced different proposals. It's still an ongoing process. Today, it has a plan for a research center, for example, for 14 million euros, but we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. However, it consists no analysis of impact assessment of social environmental ones, and it doesn't take into consideration the neighboring community. Let's go to the neighborhood. So, as you can see, the low-income neighborhood with the Gecekondu with property rights, but no construction rights, and it's also declared as a renewal area in 2005 and might be displaced. That's uncertain also. I want to talk about the struggle of the community, therefore. So we can see the informal settlements, the precarious public spaces, but also an ongoing gentrification process that started because of these images of this new Istanbul that's going to be happening there. The community started a neighborhood association, to be able to at least maybe influence the planning process. And for me, it was mainly interesting why the people are opposing to these projects, because let's not forget that it's a public project and it's initiated by the government. So their main reasons were the mistrust towards this kind of regeneration, the lack of information, and that's why they also engage with other NGOs and other activists, and also fear of displacement. For Bedrettin Neighborhood Association, they inform the people, they create networks, and they fight in legal means. They do advocacy planning, but somehow they are also limited on the stakeholder position of their participants, and they cannot promote the whole voice of the neighborhood. In means of true needs within the workshop, what they need there was, it's said to be public spaces, social programs, and solutions for its vulnerable economic situation, mainly. And this, I find the job creation was the first that came always in front. Although in the discourse of the associations or of the planners, of the ones that came forward, it's always about the waterfront or the conservation, but the people there actually need this kind of programs. So the development could actually include this into the proposition. I was inspired also by the speakers yesterday with the children's perspective, and during our workshop we also had some drawings with the children, and I want to share one of them. Space for fishermen to catch, says one kid. And I think he actually incorporated both the social and the economical aspects in just one phrase. Really quick, there were several analyses of actors' power in the decision-making process. Here we cannot see the neighborhood community. Also in relationships, it was done with Graph Commons tool for it. We can see Chamber of Architects militating for the horizontal networks. So then again, an institution, central, with also other tasks and other agenda. Not that it's a bad one, but yeah, we're talking about the neighborhood here. And also power of interest analysis, where again we have the people that are that should be included, involved, essentially to involve. This was made with 250 questionnaires with the planners involved and against it. And this is why I show this, because I'm thinking of Bodo and the projects that we are looking forward to, and I say we have big ambitions. And also from my interviews, planners told me that, okay, we are thinking of the community, but we are planning for the whole city. We are planning for the whole citizens. So we have to have in mind the whole citizens' perspective. And I'm wondering, is the neighboring community part of this city? Actually, isn't it? So conclusions with this project was that a waterfront regeneration project made for public interest, but the rights of the future users of the space are lost between a non-transparent process and a national planning policy, and the fight between the two sides of governance forms, gaining ground to the governance landscape. And I just wanted to bring it a bit at the global level, because we are always talking about the Northwestern project examples, but I'm sorry to say that I have seen the same features but in different forms, considering the neighboring community, and factors leading to negative results. On one hand, the literature warns us about the public-private partnerships, so the involvement of the private sector. Here it was the government. On the other hand, same negative results. And the opposition usually is from the neighboring community. They come forward and say, okay, it's our interest, displacement, job opportunities, gentrification, I don't know, everything. Can we take social housing into the project? But here we face, maybe like in other countries, I don't know, but we face a strong opposition and mistrust and mental barriers between a fight of gaining the right to the city. Thank you. Yeah.
Let's go to the next one.
Kunai, right? I'm pronouncing right?
Kunai, yeah.
How about I'll say the paper, Applied Research on Public Participation, the title of the paper.
I think that's you.
That's you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good.
Thank you. We are having Kunai starting.
Yeah, good work.
Let me just put it on the microphone for you.
Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Our team has done some public and public opinion survey in Fancheng County and Anhui province of China. We have explored some methods of operation from the aspects of practice and methodology, and I will share them with you now. This one, I will introduce from 4 aspects: background, concept, practice, and conclusion. The social cost of an urban reconstruction project is usually much higher. It's owing economic cost. Social cost is one economic cost and other cost. For example, social management, economical, environment, cultural values. So Chinese economy on the new normal to urban development and urban renewal and urban reconstruction. Urban renewal and urban reconstruction will gradually become a common urban planning project. For example, Chinese growth tends to be stable and driven force in small developers. growth change from speed and quality to coordination and qualities. Transform from external growth and intensive growth. Pay more attention to internal growth movement and processive development models. Urban reconstruction planning has greatly requirements for the advanced method and exercise passion, and it also play and improve living environment of the public. So, this is Chinese academic Guo Shouren. I think the five this in five. Guo Shouren was referred to the 6 basic commands of online model of planning works. Among these, the first 5 has basically recognized the online model, and only the public publication platform is relatively weak. So, in Fancheng County, we try to improve such a platform for public publication. Fancheng model trying to form a framework of PIA. 1, participation. 2, investigation. 3, evaluation and action. The main idea is to manage the public publication through the whole process of urban renewal planning, so as to improve the urban planning process. New model of urban renewal based on public publication. There are 3 stages. The first stage is investigation. The second stage is evaluation, and the third stage is action. Adjustment and improvement of the relationship between the government and the people in China. This is people, this government, lack of communication. Our study tries to communicate publication with governments and in public people from the outside. Key use to slow illumination public opinion collection from fragment communication. We will micro-chection technology platform we call the playbook. Illumination public opinion collecting technology, fragmented collection. We think background operation safe and controllably is very important. We from SPS and SS. And this one is very important. Design participable and questionnaire breakdown and integration. For example, 100 people do 100 questions, and 2,000 people do 5 to 10 questions. Finally, we sum the same conclusion. So I'm afraid fragmentation, integration, exploration on this planning particular people in the field of urban renewal. We first the urban reconstruction, region construction military planning. 2, comprehensive evaluation of objective information of the region and subjective information of public. To planning the local planning suited to the local conditions. So we will the PIA framework with public publication. This example is Chinese county. This is Fanchang. The scope of the study includes the old city of Fanchang County, and the area is 2.8 square kilometers. Publication survey will be concluded over the whole area of the regions. This is paper. One, the questionnaire and the collection amount of question means to conduct of the survey. We do something to good. The first paperwork is Fanchang News and the Wuhan Diary of the Paul. The next questionnaire QR code. We can through the iPhone to scan the WeChat. Scan of the public symbol of the first poll. And the next, we scanned over the surveys in the communities. And this one, we choose the place where the residents of Fancheng County usually gather the paragraph and propose the poll. Urban renewal by means of offer. We offer some little gifts on Friday, Wednesday, and public holidays. Public awareness of the recent, we conclude three, and this one, knowing what government has done. Next, knowing the channel of the urban renewal, and the finally, level of the familiarity with the specific urban renewal. Public attention and understanding are closely related to the project's own situation. So we reject subjections. The older reform projects which is more family to the needs. Can future conduct an in-depth investigation of the situation. Basic attitudes. The conclusion, whether a bad renewal is necessary, the answer very spot. Whether they are willing to participate in urban renewal, very willing. Depends on public population. They provide three press opens. The finally channel of the public opinion impression of their points, nearly 18% cannot directly pass opinions to different departments. So we get some suggestions, broaden the ways and ways for the message which express their opinions. The public opinions and attitudes towards the urban renewal project are mainly determined by the three following aspects. One, solution, whether and when the practice used in daily life can be resolved. Benefit, how to urban renewal projects affect them, and whether it would break them benefit or trouble. Effect, whether participation in the urban renewal project is determined by whether the effect and participation will affect its outcome. So, urban renewal, and this is public participation. We will form the plan book. Come from the. Okay. Come from the message. Go to the message. Serve the people. Thank you for listening. Okay.
Good night, everybody. Name is Jian Changyang. I come from Southeast University. During these days, I'm very enjoy beautiful landscape, especially enjoy the lecture, many good lecture. Yeah. Today, I will talk about endogenous and inclusive development of older residential area. First, I will talk about concept and the meaning about endogenous, and then discuss community planner setting. In the fact, take about workable measure and holistic route. In general, urban regeneration is not good for the social issue. I think we should build a good relationship between environment, culture, economy, and other elements. We should build certain urban regeneration. We also do community space planning, community cultural planning, and community industry planning, and so on. In general, in the older area, usually the bad physical condition, but social network is very good. So we need study harmony, society, social justice, and inclusive development from the roots of these social issues. Many years ago, many scholars studied the role of endogenous development. First, in sociology, Toromi Kozoko in Japan defines the role of endogenous development. And then John Friedman, Jane Jacobus, and Pete Kozsop, and so on. We need build on the base public participation, multi-party cooperation, and community autonomy. We also build a bridge between the top-down and the bottom-up. In the endogenous regeneration, by do many things, it can more easily motivate and mobilize the residents. It can also cut the cost of regeneration and management. On the other hand, build community fund, community center, community planner is also very important. In the process, urban planning is planning how to do and discuss something with residents, and also do some organize for cultural and other activities for the urban renewal. Third, it can keep and enrich the area features of its own. This is some example for the urban renewal. left is before, and the right is after. For the foundation principle is also very important. Firstly, residence participation, equal cooperation, and the progressive regeneration. Inclusive development is very important. It can fully protect the city overall interest. It also reflects the public policies and fully realize the legal rights and the interests of residents, and many balance between social, economy, and the environment benefits. Okay. Okay. Well, quickly. Finally, we do some measures about the endogenous urban regeneration. We know urban renewal is very complex. System is very important. Members are made of many elements: professional, expert, investor, and of course, residents. Many activities and many manners. So we choose community planner. For example, in Shanghai, is very successful, built a community planner. It all includes agency, urban council, planning bureau, civil affairs bureau, and so on. Second, prove physical space as need. We build security space, over space for the labor social activities, is upon utilization, elasticity of the space. Third, increase human care, especially either also offer jobs for the lay offers. We can improve social environment, increase residence cohesion. In the fan, build a holistic road in which connected intelligence should be brought into play. We from for 3 levels: community organization, residential, professional planner, and implementation level. Conclusion: endogenous urban regeneration of older residential area as a more inclusive approach aimed at sustainable harmonic development is driven by entire demands, participated by local residents based on public participate and combine top-down and bottom-up management. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Just put bucket. Just put it in the bucket. Infestation is.
No. This one. Okay, I need the note. Okay.
Can you scroll forward and backwards here?
Okay.
Or you can use this one.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gan Xingyue, and I come from Tsinghua University, the Department of Urban Planning in Beijing. So today it's my pleasure to share some work about the urban regeneration in Beijing Old City. And firstly, I want to introduce some basic information about Beijing Old City. And it is derived from Yuan Dynasty, which has a long history. And it is in the center of Beijing. And the right picture is the map of Beijing Old City. As you know that Beijing Old City is the masterpiece of urban planning, and it is one of the greatest historical cities in the world. But on the other hand, the dilapidated housing regeneration in Beijing Old City is one of the vital issues of city planning and construction in Beijing over the past 50 years. So the picture indicates the physical evolution of living area in Beijing Old City before 1949 and the present. We call this type of traditional living area is courtyard. In Chinese is Siheyuan. The physical change in this Siheyuan was derived from the socialist planned economy period. Because of the socialist public housing institution system, by the end of the 1988, a little more than half of the traditional residents had suitable building structure and was safe to live. So from 1992 to 2003, the old city experienced two phases of urban regeneration. Taking the approach of housing demolition and the residents relocation, we call Chaiqian in Chinese. In this period, large-scale historical areas disappeared totally. The housing demolition peaked in 2001. About 1,850,000 square meters dilapidated housing was demolished. At the same time, the luxury shopping malls, the CBD, opened up the modern image of the capital city. After 2004, the landscape promotion and the placemaking of historical area, which combined the traditional culture with the modern consumption and traveling, was the main approach of the urban regeneration in this phase. This approach was intensified in the period of preparation for Olympic Games in 2008. However, serious policies in this phase focused little on improving the living conditions of the local residents. So in February 2014, President Xi Jinping indicated that historical culture is the soul of the city, protecting the historical heritage as protecting our lives. This statement has become the new ideology of urban development in Beijing at present. In the Beijing Master Plan from 2016 to 2035, which was published in 2017, integrated conservation, no demolition in historical area in the city center have been proposed. So, housing vacation has become the main practice of housing regeneration in Beijing Old City at present. Housing vacation is a local state-oriented housing regeneration with public-private partnership. It is applicable to the traditional housing in historical areas in Beijing Old City. The local government formulates the policies about housing regeneration and then authorizes the local state-owned enterprises to be responsible for negotiating with the local residents to vacate their houses and give them relocation housing in the periphery of the city. For the homeowners, housing vacation and relocation are voluntary. After that, the use rights of vacant houses are transferred from local residents to the enterprises. After being repaired and redesigned, the enterprises rent the houses to the new industries such as boutique hotel or studios. The financial support of housing vacation is from both public subsidies and mortgage from bank. The model of housing vacation was promoted in most historical areas in Beijing Old City at present. The field study I had was proceed from July to August in 2017 in a community, that is the anonymous name, which is located in one of the historical preservation districts in Beijing Old City. And there are 583 households living in 98 traditional courtyards. As you can see in the picture, that this is 98 courtyard, and the dark color means the FAR of the courtyard is high. It means that there are many families living in it. So through interviewing the enterprises, the local residents, and the local governments, the paper finds that there are three main contradictions in the process of housing vacation. The first one is in each courtyard, only all households are willing to vacate houses and relocate. The housing vacation will be valid. Because many factors affected the intentions of housing vacation, it's difficult to come to an agreement among all households in a courtyard. Although the housing vacation is voluntary, families who wanted to vacate and relocate couldn't achieve the desires. The second one is because the living areas of new relocation housing is related to the current living area. Some families can't be up to the standard of the new housing placement. This is one of the reasons why some families experienced the bad living condition, but they don't want to vacate their houses. As you can see, this field study case that I had in a family, that's why they didn't choose the housing vacation. And the third one is from the standard of compensation to the location of the resettlements. The homeowners just had the right to know. Local residents are lack of communication channels with local government. This situation is the same as the period of housing demolition in 1990s. For these three main contradictions, there were a large gap between the number of residents who were willing to vacate the house and the real number of housing vacation. As you can see, the number in the right. After housing vacation, according to the planning of state-owned enterprises, there were three new functions being embedded in the vacant houses. That is boutique hotel, high-end office, and designer studios, and public services. Taking one courtyard that has been vacated successfully, because from housing vacation to the housing reuse, the cost is very high. For the cost recovery, the enterprise had no other choices but to rent the vacant houses to the high-end business types. So, comparing with the housing demolition, in the process of housing vacation and reuse, there is no change that the district government and the enterprises are the core participants to be responsible for the policy making and capital investment. The local residents relocate, then housing gets a higher value through spatial reproduction. The only difference is the local residents can choose to vacate their houses or not. Housing placement in the periphery of the city is the only way to improve a local residents' living condition. For those people who are not willing to vacate the houses or not up to the standard of compensation, there is no policy and financial support for them to improve their existing living conditions. So in the housing regeneration in the Beijing Old City, in the future, serious policies and institutions should be improved. For example, developing the housing vacation and the housing rent simultaneously, and taking the different housing policies towards local residents. For those residents who are willing to relocate, they can choose housing vacation and get the new houses in the periphery of the city. Or they can choose to keep the housing use rights or property rights, and then rent them below the market price to the third institute, which may be managed by the local government. Then the residents who are not willing to relocate can rent these houses to improve the per capita living area. That's all. Thank you.
one. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's very glad to have a chance to communicate with each other in here. And my name is Xia Huiyi, also come from the Tongji University in China. I'm the colleague of the with the Yancheng Ai. And today my topic is multi-dimension urban plan in renewal of the old city. In China, urban renewal planning community is the smallest unit of the government management department, which directly reflect people's life and development demands. At present, government realized public participation is very important to urban renewal. And the Internet Plus provides a space for further improve and development for multi-dimension. Sorry. And however, the older city reconstruction faced some problems, which are follows. Resident demand are diversified and cannot met by traditional standardized community public service facilities and planning development. After the reconstruction of the older city, a lot of manager systems just are formed, so it is difficult to meet the real demands of the resident. And in urban plan aspect, the space actually limited to adjust, such as the parking problems of the older community. It is hard to find other space to expand. Because of this, we still, according to the Thousands Index, when we do the urban plan, it cannot fix to change of the human lifestyle and the changing of the family structure and so on. So about this situation, we think we should use the ICMP, which is the Internet Plus Communicate Plan and Management system to deal with the situation. It is mainly to establish an online platform to publish government policy on community uses and O2O service for community residents, so as to replace the offline community service or public facilitating. Public service are not only government service, but also commercial service, such as such as the booking taxi and so on. This means that when we doing community urban plan, we can make a full use of the online and offline resource. And when in the early section 4, I heard when we do the urban design, we should deal with two questions in the urban renewal planning, which is how to deal with the substance, and we should do the marketing research active or passive. So we mentioned the ICMP system. The advantage of ICMP system, which is the view of the urban plan network design rather than traditional community website design service. It's more humanly and targeted. And because it's meant government leader service have more reliable and the system is only targeted at the community uses. It belongs the semi-closed system. The government, as the management interface, can use effective demand data in real time to evaluate needs of the public service and giving timely feedback. ICMP theory combined with the government, the property and the resident three platform together, it can open the true face-to-face dialogue between the government and the public. And it improves the public participation. Big data obtained from the website will show the real people demand and just more effective for government to do the urban plan. And we choose it's the government platform which including some function for the community resident. And we choose the case from the Fanchang as what Yan Chun'ai's remind. And we do the 5-step of the systems. Just I quickly to skim about the content. This is the serious shortage of the community management and the service facility in Old Town community of government in Fanchang area in Wuhu. Some situation Yan Chun'ai already mentioned, so I just scan it. And the residents are very dissatisfied with the original community public service and know little about the street Wi-Fi and the service. We do some system for survey about the residents. They are the interface, APP, and so on. And according to the results, we found although the government to raising the living standard of the residents, but due to the characters of community population structure and the lack of effective and timely communication, it didn't meet the demand of the resident of main service. And for this, on the basis of original planning and adjustment, we get the data. According to the results, the present study and around 2 kilometers within the scope of the public service results to the communicate public service designed a special ICMP system. We get the real information and we do a part of the solution for them. Yeah, okay. And after the case, we found that we can actually deal with the space problem in older city renewal through the ways not only in the traditional urban plan, but also we can consider the internet resource. But we met some biggest problem of it. In fact, as the leading party of the platform, many local governments not want to responsible and guarantee the quality of the service providers. And also most of Chinese government are not willing to make a planning decision based on public data feedback. Due to the limitation of the human resource and the public facilitating space, the community management is unwilling to fully and timely announce all public welfare policy and facilities to everyone. And the older people, they cannot get used to the internet by themselves to order the service. It is very difficult for non-government parties to integrate the ICMP platform for this. So our further research will focus on whether to overcome this problem. If you anyone have interested about this topic, can contact me. And my email address is wally@cina.com. Thank you very much.
So because for myself, when I do my PhD project, that I use her work in the first time as well. But how would you think of her work using in the context of Istanbul? Because in my case, it didn't work in China when I come to the field. So how would you think?
Thank you. I didn't quite actually use it much more. Okay. Patty Healy, for me, for example, she's not actually giving you exact solution of how to do it, because she was also involved in Thatcher's projects, you know. So for me, her collaborative planning book was much more of a question and of saying, okay, we do it like this. She was in the process. I was also in the process. So it's quite a struggle to play the part in a public institution and then also know what you have to do in advocacy planning and finding this balance. And I think she actually pointed out to the fact that if collaborative planning would be, this would be how we would make it. But I don't think she actually for 1 second said, okay, a project has to be like inclusive transport, like all this, and it's gonna happen, of course. No, it's never gonna happen like this, and we know that because we are involved in planning every day. So this is what I wrote in the paper, more in detail. So yeah. Yes, that's very interesting. Yeah, we can make a comparative study. Yes.
And usually comparative studies would reveal beautiful results.
Exactly. We have a gap there in theory in developing countries, and I also find it a problem that we always. That's why I used the Northwestern example as reference, because we always refer to those examples, and we also compare to that theory, and we have to start building the theory in the developing countries, because we have a different political context and different social context and different cultural, like, yeah. The other question. I know the university.
A bit to grassroots movement.
It's really top down, yes. It's really top down, but the process is still ongoing, and the project it's not there yet. So
But
it's
still,
something
I
still
mean, even in
since
Istanbul,
2000 and I think 15, and publicly it was declared in 2017. Actually, the project was there, was happening, but like it was declared, and it's still not been built. I think the struggle it's still there. And I think it's informing because the planners, how much we would want to like put the advocacy planners on a topper shelf and saying, okay, they are the angels, but also the planners in the public institutions, they are facing great challenges because they are between a national policy and their profession, and they want to reach, and they actually try to incorporate, because in the end there's a policy, but nobody can tell you not to put public green space there, or like, you know, just because you have this profession and you can still touch a bit, you know, in our project. Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but this is not China. This is the whole world.
Even here, we are like facing the top down. I don't know.
But you would really claim that in Turkey, everything related to urbanism and planning is a top-down approach?
No.
I had some experiences there where they still would go for community.
There's like Kadıköy, if you know, with TAC office, and also Talimane was also from the presentations of this conference, and it's a bottom-up, but much more like kind of entrepreneurial.
The other overall observation that I've seen in China and Turkey and other places, from what you guys say, developing world, also I'm totally rejecting this kind of terminology because it's not
developing.
Fair.
Yeah, it's not fair.
It's not fair to talk about a country with more than 10,000 years of civilization, and you said developing, right? But the point I'm trying to say is that what I've noticed, even in Russia, that even within the planning institution, as if you have generation of planners. So you have the big guys, the old guys, belongs to the old school. They love the top-down approach. They cannot think independently. They need someone to tell them that the president did that or the minister did that, as opposed to the young generation who's full of energy. They want to ask questions, they want to oppose, they want to reject. So I don't know, how do you feel about this?
Yes,
like you.
Our own self,
Oh yeah, beautiful young generation. This is my point.
That they don't have to do that, seriously.
Yeah.
But they choose to do that.
Invite me and I will.
I'm trying to promote, the system. But when I talk to the government, they sometimes they don't want to take the responsibility,
Yeah, but I had a very interesting experience in Ningbo. You know Ningbo, right? In China. And I'm sorry for the bad pronunciation. But the experience is that those old guys, this old generation of planners, and correct me if I'm wrong, they need also to understand that they are dealing with different users, with different people. I mean, I was walking in the streets in the city, and if somebody would take you there with a blind on your eyes, you will never imagine that this is China because of the preconceptions that you have, because of the stereotyping. I mean, people were so open, was so liberal. Even the fashion code was absolutely wonderful. All of them are carrying their Apple phones and Apple laptops and whatever. So I'm saying, I think it's about time to understand that there's a paradigm shift, not in terms only of planning thinking, but also in terms of people that you are serving. How do you feel about this?
Exactly. I also tell my students all the time that they have to, you know, because we start at the Garden City, and what today was the keynote speech, like Le Corbusier and the Modern City, and this is our 0 point. We have to delete that 0 point and create a new one. I think this is what we have to do. And also Habitat 3 agenda, including everybody. We still have 20 more years to do that, I think. Yeah.
So it will be great if you guys participate in a project.
We should make a...
So you have a question too, There you go.
I have a question for Professor Yang, because I'm Yang Sisi from School of Architecture, Tsinghua University. So I know Professor Yang from Southeastern University. He is the chair of city planning departments. Yeah. So actually, Professor Yang is really an expert from the city generation, and he's even the chair of city generation committee in China. So I have a question for Professor Yang is, currently we are all moving forward to the community participation. However, actually there's another dilemma, like yesterday we have a seminar talking about that, like whether we do need urban planners do in the city and the community participation, just like villages. The rural areas, they used to have no planners, but they do very well. So also the same as when we all have like city planners should involved into the community participation. But to some extent, we just find they are playing the role of negotiation platform, or just listen to the different citizens' ideas and collecting them and suggest something. To some extent, they lost some of technical leadership on some planning things, because if we listen to everyone, it will always be impossible to satisfy everyone. So usually planners will feel a dilemma from the top, I don't like to use top down, but would like to use a professional leadership perspective to tell you what will be the ideal planning things. But on the community aspect, we'll usually we would like to more demographic and like everyone satisfied, we vote for something. So it's used to be hard to think, what do you think about planners should do in the community development?
Thank you, very interesting question, thank you. There you go. Tough question, Professor.
You very good question. You're very important for the urban planner understanding the demand of the residents is very important. For urban planning is only a medium and build a bridge between the urban planning and the social and public interest and so on. I think we can build community urban planning is very important for in China. Yeah, only.
Thank you, Professor. Any more comments or questions?